and all sorts. You're going to be having all these questions mull around in your brain. We'll get to questions later on, by the way. So before we get stuck into that, it's just really important that we pay our respects to the Gunai-Kurnai people, the traditional custodians of this land that we're meeting on today. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Indigenous people in this room today. Really important to just continue to remember the land that we're on always. And this event has been organised as part of Let's Chat Gippsland and 16 days of activism against gender-based violence by the Wellington Gender Equity and Violence Prevention Partnership. So much work is being done behind the scenes. It's been a really great campaign. I've seen it all over the place, actually, this year. Really, really great. 16 days, you know, maybe next year 17, 8, so just keep upping the ante. I should introduce myself properly, shouldn't I? So I'm Amber. I work at ABC Gippsland in breakfast radio. Really good job. You get to hang out with all sorts of people. But I guess for me, personally, I'm really into stories with from people with diverse backgrounds and hearing those stories we miss often. And what I'm really hoping to get out of this day personally is, I think in the mainstream media, us included, we kind of chuck out issues into the world and we don't often enough talk about the solutions to those problems and look a bit more into those problems. And especially when it comes to gender-based violence, family violence, we sort of, you know, we don't really know how to talk about it properly in the media, I don't think, yet. We're getting better, but not really. So I'm really keen to sort of take some stuff away from today. But the aim of the game really is to remind ourselves that violence against women is preventable. It's not something that just is always going to, we can do something to prevent it. It's not, we shouldn't really be complacent about that. And hopefully you'll feel a slight bit of hope by the end of this, that you can realise that there are social drivers that cause violence against women. And yeah, conversations like this are a really important part to driving that change. So we're going to get stuck into that later on. There are some housekeeping things to keep in mind. Who's got a phone, everyone? Throw it in the bin, get rid of it. Don't need it. Now chuck it on silent if you could, ideally. I'd like to get rid of mine, but I can't. And yeah, so we have this fancy, give it up to Meg, by the way, who's doing all this tech stuff. Oh yeah, this is gonna be good. I'm into lots of rowdy applause, by the way. I think it's good. So yeah, so it's being filmed. And by the way, online viewers, feel free to chuck in questions because we'll get to those later on. Is that, yep, good. All right, questions will happen later on. But yeah, it will be recorded, so just keep that in mind. And if you do feel a bit about anything we talk about, because it will get quite heavy at times, potentially, just feel free to take a step out of the room. It's not rude to do that. 1-800-RESPECT is a really good resource if you feel like you want to chat to someone. Take a minute, come back in, whatever you want to do. No dramas at all in any way. So on that note, I reckon we should just get straight back into it. So to kick things off, Joe Byers will set the scene for us. So Joe is with Quantum Support Services and also the Orange Door. And the Orange Door have recently announced a new service for Wellington and East Gippsland, which is really exciting. So give it up for Joe. If we can get Joe up the front.
Hi, thanks for coming today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet, the Gunai-Kurnai people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and anyone that's here today. And also acknowledge that they hold the hopes, the traditions and the stories of the Aboriginal peoples. I'd also like to pay my respects to victim survivors, because it's due to their experiences that we've had the changes in legislation that we've got today that we work under. So I've been given a short space to talk about family violence, and we can't begin to capture the impact of family violence in that time frame, and the impact that it has on families and communities across the region. But I've got a few brief facts to put it into perspective. So 1 in 3 women report physical or sexual abuse across Australia, and that doesn't include all the other forms of abuse as well. So that's quite staggering in itself. Family violence is also the leading cause of death for women under 45. That 30% of Victoria's homelessness is as a result of family violence. The cost to Victoria in dollars is 5.3 billion and 21.6 billion across Australia. So it's got a significant financial cost, as well as the impact that it has on individuals and the community. Last year, last financial year, Wellington was rated in the top 3 of reported family violence per capita, and East Gippsland was second. And when you look at the stats, East Gippsland and Wellington are usually in the top 4 to 5. So we've got really significant rates of family violence. That's out of 79 local government areas across the state. Last year in Outer Gippsland, there were 2,915 reported incidents of family violence. And again, that doesn't include the unreported family violence. For Wellington, up until March of this year, there was 1,407 reported incidents of family violence, which was up 1.6% on the previous year. When you think of those stats, they can be quite overwhelming and disheartening, but I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we can make a difference, that it's really difficult to work in the family violence space, both professionally and personally. And as services and individuals, we can't do it alone. We need it to come as a community shift, and we need to be calling out the family violence when we see it. We need to call out the jokes that people are making. We need to call out when people make statements like boys will be boys, or he probably hurt you because he likes you. That's not okay to say to a 7-year-old, so that she builds her values and her internal dialogue around that message, because that's not okay when she's 7, and it's definitely not okay when she's in a relationship when she's older, to have that message told to her that he likes you and that's why he hurts you. The Orange Door has been open for about a week now. So we've got a site in Bensdale, and then we've also operating out of Uniting and Quantum in Sale, because we don't have a physical site yet, but we will get one early next year. The services that we have, or the partner agencies that we're working very closely with, are Gippsland Lakes Community Health, Latrobe Community Health Service, Quantum, Ramiac, Uniting Services, and Uwinna-Wurnalong. And for Sale, like I said, we don't have an office, but we can do outreach, and we can come to victim survivors and perpetrators and children where they need to be met. There's a 1-800 number that you can call, and then you can connect with our service, and we'll do what we can to help. We've got a no wrong door policy, so even if you don't fit our requirements, we can always direct you to services that can help. We've got some pamphlets and cards and stuff out the front as well, so if anyone wants any information. We've also got some workers from both Quantum and the Orange Door here, so just to build on that message of, if anyone does feel like they want to talk about anything, or they've got someone that they would like to get some more information about, then definitely make contact with us outside. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. You can stay here if you want. This is the comfy chairs upgrade. Now, there's been a lot of excitement about the Orange Door with texters on our show. So yeah, it's very exciting. It's much needed, isn't it? All right, so Claire Bauer, would love it if Claire jumps up, pretty please. So Claire is with Gippsland Women's Health and is musical chairs, and is keen to chat about gender equity relating to violence prevention. The chairs, better things come out when you're sitting in a chair like this, I reckon. It's just like you feel wise or something.
Thanks, Amber. Hi, everyone. I too would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, so Gunai Kunai, and acknowledge Aboriginal people here with us today. Every person deserves to be safe and live a life free from violence, including in their own homes, workplaces, online, when they're taking part in sport or getting involved in their community. We have just heard from Jo about what family violence is and how prevalent it is in our community here in Wellington. I would like to spend a couple of minutes now talking about what drives family violence and the things we can do to prevent this violence from happening. So what do we mean by preventing family violence? When we talk about preventing something, we are talking about stopping a problem before it begins. When we talk about preventing family violence or violence against women, we are talking about changing those attitudes, behaviours and beliefs that belittle or disrespect women and girls, as it is within these disrespectful attitudes that gender inequality begins. Although the statistics are very sobering, there is hope in knowing that if we work together in all areas of our lives, we can stop this violence from occurring. There is a dedicated workforce of people working to prevent violence against women in our communities across Gippsland, and we're going to hear from 4 of them in a moment. Victoria and Australia are leading the way in preventing violence against women work. In Australia, we have an organisation called Our Watch. Our Watch is a national leader in the primary prevention of violence against women and their children. They work to embed gender equality and prevent violence where Australians live, learn, work, and socialise. All of our work in prevention is guided by a national framework called Change the Story. Change the Story is an evidence-based framework to guide a coordinated and effective national approach to preventing violence against women, and it's used right across Gippsland. This framework outlines what needs to be done at all levels of society, from individuals to schools, from workplaces to governments, to address the underlying drivers and stop violence before it starts. The Change the Story framework provides us with 4 actions we all must take. Number 1, we must challenge the condoning or excusing of violence against women. This might sound like violence is not okay or not acceptable, which is what Jo mentioned earlier. Number 2, we must promote women's independence and decision-making in public life and relationships. This might look like listening to women and their expertise. Action number 3 is build new social norms that foster positive identities, not constrained by rigid gender stereotypes. An example of this is raising our children to be who they want to be, not limited by gender roles. And number 4, support men and boys to develop healthy masculinities and positive, supportive male peer relationships. This may look like supporting men and boys to express themselves and their emotions. Treating men and women as equal, building a culture of respectful relationships between men and women, and encouraging people to call out sexism and discrimination when they see it. Each of these will ultimately help us reduce violence against women and build gender equality. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. All right, now we've got facts in our head. We're ready to go. We're prepared. So this is our panel. You're all a bit far. I'm just going to do a bit of squiggling. So yeah, feel free. This is the conversation part of things. So feel free, panelists, you can chime in if you like. So it's just, you'll meet everyone pretty soon. So let's kick off with Shaun Braybrook. So Shaun is a very lovely bloke. Just met him earlier. Very friendly. So Shaun is a proud Aboriginal man who follows his grandfather line to the Cook and Yalanji people. And Shaun has worked with the Victorian Koori community for around 28 years. That's a lot, mate. It's nearly 30, it's a lot. And has been the general manager of the Wulgunggo Ngalu learning place for the past 12 years. So we're just gonna have a chat, find out a bit about your work, if that's all right. I guess you need a microphone, so can we sort that out for, you're quite far away, but it's all right. Right, you can, mate, we'll get to you, don't worry, we'll get to you. So I'm really just want to kick off with talking about this learning place and what's it all about, if that's all right.
Well, I did take a bit of a different approach, but before I do that, I'd just like to acknowledge country as well. So acknowledge the Gunai people, the elders past and present, and any elders or significant Aboriginal people in the room here today as well. And also my co-worker up the back, Jo Wandon, that's come along with me today to have a listen as well. So yeah, I thought the work that we do is a holistic approach with our men and look at the cultural side of men and rewriting the wrongs of yesterday. So I have put together a bit of a PowerPoint just with photos mainly on it, but there's one key slide that's got some words on it that I'd like to talk to. So I'd like to share that as well. So this first one here, this sits out the front of Wulgunggo Ngalu. We're a statewide program being ran down in Gippsland. Yeah, so down in Max Creek we run. And this is what we're really about in the work that we do. You see the big man standing in the front. So it's an Aboriginal man. We want our Aboriginal men to grow strong in their identity, strong in their culture. Yeah. And then always remember what's coming behind and what we need to pass on once you've addressed all your stuff and your issues and that as well. So, and what we say, it's a cultural journey of change. So we work with men that have come in contact with the justice system for a number of reasons as well. And we challenge behaviours and different things as well that I'll get to a little bit and hopefully will come out in the conversations. Cover the next slide, thanks. wanted to show people this because this is the important part about the work I do. This is my little family. So these are my 3 little girls sitting there and my little son in the background as well. So he's the youngest out of the 4 of them. And yeah, very important for me as an Aboriginal man. What I want to be able to do is, my partner's an Aboriginal, so it's our role to make sure that our girls grow up in a loving, and our little son grow up in a loving and caring environment, and really understand who they are and want to achieve all the things that they need to in the world as well. As an Aboriginal man, it's my responsibility to make sure they understand their culture, have a cultural connection, and really strong in their identity as well. So that's the work that we do. So I wanted to show people that because yeah. Next slide, thanks. I wanted to show people this as well, because when I talk about a cultural approach and what we actually do and how we actually do it, the first thing we do is we look to support the man, but we address the behaviour. So we understand that there's the two, yeah? Support the man, but address the behaviour. This is learnt behaviour. This is stuff that we've been faced with and dumped with as men since we were younger. You know, rewriting masculinity and everything else. And then we talk about all the other issues that we see there that affect in the criminal justice system, the system that we come across. So I put them up there as well. And then also, you know, the masculinity, and making sure that we understand that and give men the opportunity to understand that. We invite men through our groups, through our men's groups and things like that, to challenge their masculinity, to see where they sit with it, to understand it a bit better. A lot of our men have never ever thought about it before, have just grown up in this world. And then down the bottom, I put, we want to rewrite the wrongs of yesterday. As Aboriginal men, you know, we live in a white-dominated society, and people know that. I don't need to go into about, you know, invasion and stolen generations and all that. People understand that, people know that. But for Aboriginal men, that really affects our identity. You know, not only have we grown up in this white-dominated world, but we haven't had an opportunity to evolve as Aboriginal men. Yeah. So every narrative that we see is that as well. So that's the narratives that we want to change, and the reasons for that as well is for my daughters and my kids growing up as well, and for our community in that as well. Come to the next slide, thanks. So when I talk about that, these are the core principles that we base our program on. Yeah, and quite obviously there's a lot of other stuff within there as well. So I just might quickly talk to this a little bit. So the first one is, we call this the rules of the dreaming. So these are generic cultural principles. Yeah. So the first one is preserve the dream by order and ritual. Yeah. We want to make sure our men understand what it means to dance, understand what it means when you put ochre on, understand what it means when you bang your feet on the ground, your roles and responsibilities within your family towards your kids. Yeah, it's very important for us to understand that and for us to have them conversations as Aboriginal men. Yeah, very important. Next one is respect the land and respect the people. Yeah, so we want our men to be able to connect back to Mother Nature, understand, you know, what it is. Take that time to slow down, smell the trees, see the water, you know, feel the surrounds, feel the areas and things like that, to really connect back to that. So that's an important part for us. Take care of the environment. I think everyone knows how important that is, but also the environment that you live in as well. Make sure that your environment that you're in, that your behaviours aren't creating that as a toxic environment where you live. Yeah, so we have lots of discussions and lots of things like that around as well. Responsible for own actions. This is a really important one for us as men. Once we get our men to understand that their actions affect other people and they need to be accountable for their actions and take responsibility for them, that's where you really see the change come and really create the change in our men. So we do a lot of work around that. Yeah, we do a lot of work around that. Then the last one is very important, and it's pass on the knowledge. So as an Aboriginal man, what I've learned, what I've understand, let's pass it on. Make sure the next generation has a different narrative than what we grew up in. Yeah. So that's the fundamentals of the work that I do in the programs. Come to the next slide, thanks. And these were just some photos that I just wanted to show. These are men at a corroboree that we do out there. These men have never painted up before, never had an opportunity to do a corroboree. Yeah. Next slide, thanks. We do a lot of work in the community. We practice ceremony and that. And the importance about this is once we teach culture and we show culture, once we give the men the opportunity to practice it in a positive light and have real meaning behind it, the men really grow within this. This is at the local high school, and we're welcoming all the first year students. This is on January the 30th. welcoming all the new students and acknowledging all the ones that are going to leave the school that year as well. Next slide, thanks. This is just a ceremony at Wulgunggo, and I just wanted to show it because it sort of shows a bit of the background of the place and some men within the program as well. Next slide, thanks. Very important. These are some of the things, I think people can catch it from this, the importance of the work we do. This fella's never had an opportunity to dance with his son before and been in the program, and very special moment there for them too. Next slide, thanks. Once again, I just really love this photo. I think it catches everything because it's really about the work that we do. Yes, our men are in trouble. Yes, our men have problems. Yes, our men, we're working on to create that change and we're on a journey. Yeah. And the men also have the opportunity to bring their kids along, their family along. Very special when a man gets an opportunity to dance with his kids as well. Yep. Next slide, thanks. And this is just the end. I wanted to leave you just with this one. This is the end of, happy to chat a bit more. Cultural journey of change. This is taken up in the rainforest. These are all the men that we work with. Yeah. And the real positive aspect of Aboriginal men. Yes, these are men that have been in trouble, but that's what I said before about support the man, address the behaviour. Yeah. Give the men the opportunity to grow and work through that. And then the last little bit, this is what I stand for, and this is what we teach all our men. As an Aboriginal man, it's my responsibility to pass on the knowledge. So I think that's a little bit of a snapshot about the work that I do and been working at. And yeah, very powerful. So thanks, Abby.
Awesome photos, really good photos. Hey, Shaun, so do you have any thoughts and advice on how to support the man without condoning violent behaviour?
Yeah, well, definitely within our program as well, is the men that come down there, the men, it's a voluntary program, so the men have made that first step, which is very important for that. And then what we look to do is we look to invite the man to challenge his behaviours, to look inside, look what that is. And that's done through our men's groups. You know, us as Aboriginal men sitting around, you see the dance circle, we paint up and we do this. The big man that you see there, we have a truth ceremony around it. So we sit around that big man, we put ochre on. Once you put the ochre on, whatever comes out of your mouth has to be the truth. You don't have to speak, you can just sit there and listen if you have to, but whatever you say has to be the truth. Yeah? And we talk about what do you see, what happens this. So that's that real approach. Like, if you're going to really do the work, you have to have the men open to do the work. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. We see a lot of men's behavioural change programs around the place that do a fantastic job and definitely have men take that first step forward. Our approach is really about the man doing the work himself, driving that himself, understanding that and challenge that.
We're running out of time, but I'll ask you more stuff later. But actually, just quickly, how can people support your program if they'd like to? How can people in the room support you in your program?
I suppose just by understanding the work we do, understanding a little bit better. Our women play a big role within our program. We have elders come down, teach culture. We have 2 female staff members that are fantastic within our organisation and that as well. So probably just understanding a little bit and understanding Aboriginal culture, and don't judge people on their face value or whatever. You know, get to know the people and understand. So.
Thanks, Shaun. We'll chat to you later. There's still time. There's many questions to be had. Thank you very much. So just, yeah, Mel, you're up next. So Senior Sergeant Mel McLennan has the mic right now. And Mel's going to take us through the Equal, Safe and Strong Victoria Police Gender Equality Strategy 2020 to 2030. That's a big thing. It's just, yeah, I can imagine that's a lot of paperwork involved with that. And Mel has been in the Victoria Police for 17 years, starting off as a transit police officer in 2004 and transferred to Sale in 2010. And now, boom, Senior Sergeant, pretty good. So let's start off with this, with this strategy in kind of, you know, words that we would understand, because I imagine there's lots of jargon involved with that.
There's lots of jargon involved in it, and some of it I don't understand, Emma. So the strategy is about developing a more professional, flexible and diverse workforce through fostering and maintaining a gender diverse, inclusive and safe workplace. It's about ensuring the workplace is free from discrimination and harassment by treating everyone with dignity and respect and providing equal opportunity for all of our employees, regardless of their gender, culture, ethnicity, gender or sexual orientation or disability. It's about education and training to ensure adherence to performance expectations and behavioural standards. And it's about recognising that gender equality is a human right. That's the fundamental purpose of the strategy.
And what prompted this? What issues were within the police that needed to be addressed?
So Equal, Safe and Strong is the strategy that was introduced in 2020, resulting from the 2015 Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commissioner independent review into sex discrimination and sexual harassment, including predatory behaviour in Victoria Police. So it was a big wake-up call to VicPol, essentially. The VROC review highlighted that issues of safety, career progression and respect are fundamental concerns of female employees, which flows on to credibility and reputation in the community. So if our own backyard's a bit untidy, how do the community respect what we do? And obviously the Gender Equality Act, which was also introduced in 2020, provides that we, Victoria Police, demonstrate meaningful progress on workplace gender equality. To meet our obligations under that Act, this 10-year strategy was implemented.
Question without notice.
Oh, I am.
No, have you seen anything with your own eyes in your experience? What things have you seen that fits that bill over your time as a police officer?
Look, certainly I've worked in areas where, you know, it was the boys club sort of traditionally. You know, if you didn't play footy or go to the pub and hit the grog with the boys, then you're a bit outcast. And obviously females are the child bearers within society. That was also a real hindrance for a lot of female employees wanting to go off and have kids and start a family. Yeah, it was prevalent. Certainly in my 17 years, not as prevalent as it was probably 25 or 30 years ago, but there is still room for improvement.
And I guess the whole being tough thing, we're trying to break that down a bit, right? That police officers aren't just the tough units that are just mean to people. That's completely not true. Is that something that's being worked on as well?
Yeah, it's not true. We're human beings. We're representative of our community. We're mums and dads and grandparents and sons and daughters and all of that. So we've all got our own lived experience. We are human. We're not, there's no armour that this uniform, you know, gives us that sort of level of protection or anything from the world and the issues faced.
Do you think it's hard for police officers to speak out as well and ask for help if they need?
Look, I would say certainly when I first joined, definitely. But in recent years, there's a lot more support for members, whether it's mental health, whether it's family violence. You know, we're all victims, not all of us, but some of us are victims of family violence in our jobs as well. So Victoria Police has done a lot of work recognising that, you know, we're not untouchable and, you know, armoured humans. We are humans, so we all suffer, we all experience trauma, those sorts of things. So there's a lot more support out there for us now than there used to be.
And so can you try to describe how these initiatives play out? So how some of them support women within the police and how it helps the community as well?
So the strategy is really important because we've responded obviously to the VROC review, which shows that we're taking the issue seriously and we're actively trying to improve gender equality within our organisation. And it highlights the expectations of us and the commitment to improving our culture. And it's also important that the community we serve see that we're proactively taking the measures to change our own culture. We're a diverse workforce now, and it's important to ensure we embrace the different traits, attributes and life experiences of our members to reflect the community we serve. The initiatives, we've got Gender Equality and Inclusion Command, which was established in 2020. We have Women in Policing local committees, which has been established right across every division across the state. Flexible work arrangements, parental leave backfill, Task Force SALIS, which was established in 2014, which is a task force specifically to address sexual harassment and discrimination within Victoria Police. There's also the statewide redress scheme for victims, employees of Victoria Police that have been victims of this type of inappropriate, unlawful behaviour. We also have support services and training programs. There's a lot going on. How do they play out? Well, parental leave backfill. So as I mentioned earlier, female employees wanting to go off and start a family, it was sort of, you know, you were frowned upon, created short staff shortages within the workplace, that sort of thing. So parental leave backfill is exactly as it sounds. Female goes off on maternity leave and the police station will get an employee to backfill that position for the length of time that she takes off, whether that's 6 months, 12 months or whatever. And generally speaking, we end up with a free member at the other end of that, should that maternity leave member come back to the workplace. Well, we're better off anyway. And that just reduces the discrimination and workplace harm that our previous attitude towards mums had. So
anecdotally, how much of local police, like a daily thing, do you spend attending family violence call-outs?
I haven't worked the van for a number of years now, but it's still a significant amount of our work. Right across, we have 3 shifts a day, and right across those 3 shifts, it's not uncommon for at least one job to attend family violence, if not more.
And it's interesting to me because we hear so much about different crime in Gippsland, but obviously we still struggle to be able to talk about family violence. I guess there's privacy issues there, but it's still a big stigma attached, right? That I'm always just, my mouth just, yeah, my jaw drops hearing about how busy police are with those call outs. So today's a lot about prevention. Is there much work being done in prevention when it comes to your work as a police officer?
So I guess the way that VicPol are working to prevent family violence or violence in general is by making sure that the victims are fully supported and that the perpetrators are held to account. That's the biggest thing. And I think the community need to see that that's what we are doing, so that if there are other sufferers out there or other victims, that they know that if they feel strong enough to report, whether that's directly to us through Orange Door or Quantum, that they will be fully supported. We also have detectives. We have a dedicated family violence investigation unit now at Sale, and most LGAs, PSAs, police service areas have got those. So I think VicPol has acknowledged that it's an issue. Yeah. And we're doing what we can to. Yeah.
And I guess that the making survivors feel like they can tell their story as well to police, and have police trust their story and believe them must be something that you're working on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are the law enforcement agency, so we have to have community members have to have the confidence in us to do what they expect us to do. So if they have found the strength to come forward to report, they need to know that we are going to take them seriously and do everything we can, put support services in place to assist them as well, and make sure that perpetrators are held to account.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate that. Ask you a few different ones there.
I didn't stick to the script at all, Amber.
I tried a little bit, but I'm really curious. Thanks, Mel. Thank you. Give it up for Mel McLennan. I'm in trouble, definitely in trouble. Hello, online streamers. Hello, not forgetting about you. So still feel free to just file away some questions later, right? Because there's not enough time to ask everything. So you guys can ask some stuff later on. All right, Ryan's up. So Ryan Evans is from the Boisdale Briagolong Football Netball Club, and their club has done so much for diversity. The women's team, very exciting to have a female team there. And yeah, so Ryan's been the president for that club for 4 years, and also the program coordinator at Gippsport, and has a teaching background and has various off-field positions at local sporting clubs. I'm sure you've been roped into some
Pretty
few
much
games.
done it all, yeah.
Yeah. You've played games if you need. Thanks, Ryan. Give up for Ryan if you'd like. I like this clapping. All right. So how does your club challenge gender stereotypes?
Yeah, no worries. I'm sure not all of you have a lot to do with Boisdale, Briagolong, so I'll give you a quick rundown what the club's all about. We're based in the little town of Boisdale. We field 5 football teams each weekend and 6 netball teams. So 3 of those football teams are for males, so our seniors, reserves and under-17s. We also have had a youth girls and a women's team since 2018, which has been great for the club. And of course, 6 netball sides from A, B, C, D, under-17s and under-15. So even though we're only based in the little hamlet town of Boisdale, we have about 200 people participating for us each year. And if you add that to the support staff and the hangers-on and the social group members, we have over 300 people associated with the club each year. So we are a fairly sizable club. In terms of normalising or challenging gender stereotypes and roles, I can really only talk about the last 7 years. Prior to that, I was actually involved as a player. In the last 7 years, though, I have held a variety of positions. I think I've held everything over the last 7 years, and over the last 4, I've been president. We've been lucky that in a role, we have actually had a lot of female participation throughout our club in the time that I've been there, albeit it's probably more in those traditional roles. So we're secretary, canteen manager, general committee member, and a netball manager. So that's something we've actually looked at as well. Probably the most work we've done has been in the last couple of years. So after the first year of our women's and our youth girls teams playing, we realised there was a few issues that we needed to be addressed. First of all, we were fantastic on the field. Like, we're the only women's team based in the Wellington Shire. We attracted some fantastic players to the club, and it was a little bit embarrassing. We pretty much smashed every team on the park, and our women went through as undefeated premiers and champions. That first, youth girls was really good too. They set the scene. We had a lot of girls coming through, and what we think has been particularly successful is the fact that a lot of other clubs have brought youth girls teams into the league, and they've dropped out within a year or two, but we've had that team going for 4 years now, which is great. But we also noticed there was a lot of problems in terms of the fact that the women and girls trained on Wednesdays and Friday nights, and they played on Sundays, whereas all the other teams, the men's teams and the netball teams, played on Saturdays and trained at different nights as well. So there was that disconnection between the club, and the fact that we had lots more female participation numbers than males. We thought, well, what can we do to make this better? How do we get this distance apart? How do we make this club more inclusive? So we sat down and had a look at the whole different things we could look at. First of all was putting a policy in place, gender equity policy, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We looked at making changes to the committee structures, the leadership opportunities for women in the club, the way we portrayed our club or promoted our club. There was things like the physical activities we ran, the social activities we ran, and club facilities as well, and how they were used by all the different teams.
Yeah, so you had a policy. So you basically announced this policy to players as well. I'm really interested in that. Can you describe that a bit more?
Yeah, no, so a couple of policies we did in place. Because I work with Gippsland, I've done a lot of work with gender equity in the past. So I've been involved with the Orange Round for over 6 years now, which is around, which was about gender equity and the prevention of men's violence against women as well. So I've been involved with that, as well as doing a lot of gender equity audits in different clubs as well. So I basically brought that sport hat to the club. So in place, we put a gender equity policy. There wasn't really anything out there. I found some statement of intents about denouncing men's violence against women, but there's no real practical example. So we developed one ourselves, which just had listed things we have to follow, things that need to be done in terms of procedures at the club. And the other thing we did was to update the code of conduct as well. So rather than just get those policies, file them away like many clubs did, we actually try to heavily promote those as well by putting them in handbooks, as well as promoting them on their social media pages.
And okay, and have you seen a result of that? What's been the outcome of that?
Yeah, it's been good. There's probably, it's the things that have come out of that policy and the way we've done things that have actually changed a lot around the club. So we actually feel like we're one club now. Like, if you go back to that first year, and I overheard one of the girls saying, "Oh, I play football for the Boisdale Briagolong Women's Football Club." And it's like, "Oh, hang on, that shouldn't be happening. We are one club and we try and support our club." So it was that policy which drove all the change we did at the club. And I can quickly go through some of those changes if you can see here. But we looked at committee structures. So we've always been lucky on time I've been there to have good representation for women on the committee. There's actually always been more women than men, but also some of those key positions we needed to probably just amend a bit. So I introduced an executive committee, which had the president, which is myself, the secretary, and a treasurer. I also made it that our 3 arms, so our male football, female football, and netball, all had a position on there as vice president / manager. So basically we had an even gender representation, 3 and 3. We've actually changed a little bit this year. We now actually have 5 women in that executive committee, and just the 2 blokes. We've got 2 netball managers sharing the load. Also, we're able to, after the first year having male coaches, we've also had some female coaches step up. So yeah, we had a great, and the assistant coach as well was female this year too for our women's team, which was great, taking those leader positions on. We've also, in terms of talking about leadership opportunities, our netball managers are young and they're fantastic. They've really got a lot of gumption about them and energy. So we've supported them to take on leadership roles and do leadership training. So they've actually had people come in the club. They've been encouraged to join the Change Our Game network, which they have as well. So they've embraced that. So our netball program's looking really good. We've also, and I mentioned before about how we promote ourselves as a club. If you go on our social media pages, so you go on our Facebook page, the first picture we'll see is a picture of all our teams being represented. So we don't promote the senior men's team as being the apple of the eye or the best thing. It is all about all our teams, all our players. So that photo represents one player from each of the team, and that's how we try and portray ourselves. And same with all our Facebook posts or anything like. I'm not that privy to all the social media things, but our social media people do a great job with making sure that all teams are equally represented as well. Things like how we present around honour boards. The club has a long history in terms of the male footballers. The netballers came in 2004, so there was a big representation of men. What we decided to do, we took all those boards down. We didn't want to lose our history, so we put all that details, moved it from 3 boards into 1, and then we created a second board, which has gone up next to that, which is for our women's team. So that's in pride of position as well. Our women's team, I said, were very strong. We were the only team here until Sale introduced a local women's team here this year, which was fantastic. We now have a local rival, so I've done some work with them. But even that, we rearranged all the pictures on the wall. So now, particularly our first premiership, which the women got, is in pride of place amongst any of the other ones, and a bit bigger than all of the other ones as well. But they've all changed, as well as the flags on the wall. Last year we had football cards. There was no football or netball last year, so we decided let's keep people connected through the club through social media. So we made up football cards and a little dossier about all our players, and we represented men and females equally, which was great. Lots of good feedback with that one too. Things like our club handbook, equal representation with the pictures we have. We also have sponsors displays on our television screens, and between each sponsor logo is a player from all of our different teams as well. So we try to equally represent the club as much as we can with all the things we go about the place as well. A couple of other things I had here, if I can turn this over. Another thing is, as I said, there was a bit of a distance because people were training on different nights. We did a change in 2019 where all teams trained on the same ground on a Tuesday night, so they would actually get to know each other a little bit better. So first of all, our under-17s and our youth girls trained on the oval together, and then afterwards, both our men's and our women's teams would run out and we'd participate. They'd do warm-ups together, the first 2 drills together, and then they'd split up and do some individual team things, which they did, but that worked really well. The red and black ball, we want to make sure the girls enjoy themselves because they play on a Sunday, so we make sure now that it's a bye the following day on the Sunday, so they can come along and have those extra couple of drinks if they feel like they want to, and not have to worry about getting up and playing football the next day as well. And they've had really good representation from them. And the same with the vote counts and presentation nights have been merged together so that they're actually all about the club. Facilities, we've been very lucky to receive a grant from the Latrobe Valley Authority and the Wellington Shire in regards to making our female-friendly facilities better. So the toilets and the showers have all been upgraded to make them usable by the females as well as the males. We've continued to fund additions. This year we put in a better kitchenette area for the netball room. So we've got lots of young mums around the club, so we put in microwave, change tables, little fridges to put bottles and things like that. Play areas we've erected with cushioning, and we've sourced lots of toys to try and make it more of a female and family-friendly environment as well. So yeah, look, there are a lot of things that have all come about out of that original policy. And we look back and saw what can we actually do around the change of club, which is practical things we can actually do to improve the inclusive experience for everybody.
Really quickly, why?
Why? I guess I've always been personally worked a lot with females. From a teaching background, I was for 11 years, and literally I was the only bloke in an office with lots of women. And I obviously get on with them really well. And my philosophy, as well as other club members of the club, is we create an inclusive space for everybody, and that's what we like to hang our hat on at the club. Is that anybody can come, regardless of age, gender, ability, that they can come along and have a game or get involved with the club in some capacity as well. I think football clubs, I know I talk too much.
Yeah,
really.
I think we should talk about the stereotypes types
we
of footy
can be.
clubs later on, yeah?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think, yeah, that's interesting. I find. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the chat. And you're on. Thanks, Ryan. All right, Sarah Corbell has the mic right now. And Sarah has been the project lead in respectful relationships at the Department of Education since 2017, and previously worked as a coordinator at Gippsland Women's Health and as a classroom health teacher. You've been in the women's health space for 20 years. A lot of experience, I told you. Thank you very much. Thanks for hanging out. All right, so let's talk about this Respectful Relationships Schools program and what it's all about.
Thanks, Amber. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge country too. I acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Gunai people, and elders past, present, any Aboriginal people in the room today, and also acknowledge the peoples of the Briagolong clan of the Gunai people as well. I'd also like to acknowledge that schools have an incredibly important role in the space of reconciliation, of closing the gap. Violence, and that's the important work space to change that story as well. We absolutely have to address and do truth telling around the impact, the ongoing impact on First Nations people. So,
yeah, and what about some of the myths and misconceptions about the program?
So within the respect for relationship space, I think, and we have what we call a whole school approach, and there's a few concepts floating around there, but just firstly, thinking the teaching capacity, that's my workplace. So schools are a workplace, and they are quite a large employer in rural areas as well. So first and foremost, it is a workplace. It is a learning place where young people come to be safe and to learn and to grow. And it's also a community hub. So hearing the work that's happening outside of the school space is really important, because it supports schools to be able to address the wider impacts of family violence, knowing that local sporting clubs are thinking about and addressing the gender drivers and promoting gender equality. The police force are doing an organisational approach and really thinking about their work in that space as well. But for us, we really focus in on gender audit. First place that we start. What does it mean to currently work and learn in these organisations? What's the structural changes that we need in order to get the changes that we are looking for, because it is a long-term social change process. Then we have this other component that's called the 6 elements of a whole school approach, which means we need to look at the audit across 6 areas of a school, if you like, and that's leadership and commitment. We need to start there. What does the leadership look like in this space? Who are considered leaders, and what type of commitment do we have to the long-term work? We're not talking about a school calendar year, and we're not just talking again in the classroom. So what are we committing to? School culture and environment. So that goes back to, our policies. Let's think about what we've got in place that supports us to set a school culture. And when we think of our commitment, what is it? What's the culture that we're looking at across our school space? And then we have to do professional learning. Adults have to learn first and foremost and understand their role in promoting gender equality, addressing the gender drivers that are outlined in the National Prevention Framework, because that does inform the whole school approach. Then we get to teaching and learning and making sure that this is teaching and learning, so that we've got the resources out there. You can see what that baseline explicit teaching is, but it doesn't stop there. When we're talking about learning, we have to assess. So what are our young people learning through this process? How are we integrating it into other areas of learning? And so we don't just provide a program that's 30 minutes of learning about an issue. It's when you come into the classroom, you're looking at social emotional awareness as well as respectful relationships education in that space. And then of course we have to think about and be equipped to support those. While we're doing prevention work, we have victim survivors in the workforce within the classroom, so we need to be equipped, and we support schools to be equipped to support those that are impacted currently or historically in that space. And then we create community partnerships as well as that sixth element. So who else is out there that can support us in the prevention space, but also the response space? So it's lots to get your head around.
Yeah, for sure. How do you navigate as a teacher this notion of not putting your political beliefs in the classroom, but still wanting to get really respectful messaging out there and be a role model for these kids as well?
Yeah, I think probably picking up on what Mel had mentioned earlier, schools have a responsibility to ensure and uphold human rights. So I guess it's not a political stance. All humans have the right to live free from discrimination, free from violence. So we have a core role to play in that. And literacy and numeracy are incredibly important, of course they are, but we are creating citizens and supporting citizens to develop. And if we're thinking about a human right, then we must be supporting young people to be able to positively influence one another to support gender equality, because that is at its core a human right.
And do you think that there are some teachers around that haven't got to that, or it's kind of a changing thing? Because I think you do hear about programs, and some parents are concerned that it's not maths, it's not English, it's not what my kids are there for. But like you said, there's more to the story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge thing that we do in the school space, is that parents, carers as partners. So we want to be able to support staff to feel confident to engage with parents around the classroom learning, so it can continue with young people when they're at home, so that they can have informed conversations with parents. They are able to continue that learning in that space. And so we have to be explicit about what we are covering in the classroom, and we encourage all the schools to be opening up that teaching and learning resource and inviting parents to take a look at that, so they know what that learning is, frame up support material that can go home with students as well, so that when we talk about teaching and learning and assessment, it's then also key messages going home. And a lot of schools are doing that through each topic that's covered. It might go home in the form of children's work. It could go in the newsletter from a classroom perspective. We've been learning about gender and identity, and going back to that, fostering positive personal identities. Who am I? Who am I becoming? Who can I be? That's a conversation I believe most parents, carers want to be involved in.
We're running out of time. Can you just leave us with like a final thought? Because you summarised it really well earlier in the foyer, just for us to just stick in our brain, and we can just whip it out when we need.
So from a school's perspective, we are participating in a social change process. So we're talking generations. We're not talking about the children that are in the classroom now. We are thinking about the child that comes in at threes kinder, because it's early childhood as well. Schools, threes kinder. What's their journey going to look like? What is the world around them going to look like when they're in year 12 and going out the other end? But we're going to do that time and time again. So by having you reflect on, how do you connect with a school in this space? Is it as a parent, carer? Is it just as a former student? Is it as the next canteen manager for Boisdale Briag, where some of the that's your next role. That's the only one you probably haven't done. Is it because you're connected in with a club that students go to? Is it that in your professional role, you're doing a workplace approach that links with schools? So really thinking about social change. It's where we live, where we work, where we play. In Wellington Shire, there's so many connections. How can you support schools to be doing this work? How do schools support you to do that work as well? And I would encourage you, if you think it's valuable and you're connected to a school, send them a message, say it's great that you're doing this work. Give them the confidence that they're in the right space, because it can be quite lonely for schools. They may be the only one in their town vocal about this work. So if you can support them to continue that message, even to say, we want to know about what's happening in your classroom. It gives them confidence to say we can do that. And yeah, just keep on doing whatever it is that you do in this space that is about addressing those gender drivers and is promoting gender equality, because it's a long game. Those other messages are subtle and pervasive. We need to make sure we are more so.
Thank you very much. Give it up for Sarah, please. Yeah, good job.
Didn't look at notes, Senna.
Yeah, just it's all in your brain. Thanks for being such an engaged audience, clapping, making everyone feel very comfortable. It's kind of daunting, right? Sitting in these chairs and, you know, talking about all this heavy stuff. So I appreciate it. All right, we're taking questions now. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, you can even sit on the chair if you want, like it's fine. You can have a go if you want. And Joe and Claire, you can jump up here too if you'd like, up to you, if anyone wants to ask any questions. Anyone? Don't make me talk more. You don't want that. I've done enough.
Yep, it's absolutely supported, encouraged, and an entitlement. So, and I think it's just gone up to 12 weeks, I think, so which could be extended out to 24 weeks at half pay. So we're trying to be all inclusive, and it doesn't matter if you're male or female. We try to make it work for mums and dads in that space.
Good. Sure. Go ahead. What's your name? Trish? Hi, Trish.
Yes, so in 2015, during the enterprise bargaining negotiations, that featured, and it is now policy, and every police station across the state must have a lactation room available for expressing milk for new mums and those that come back to work after 12 months that are still breastfeeding. So, yeah. Yep.
Good question. Don't be shy. See you, Simon. I can just dump people in. How good's this? I'm drunk with power. Yeah, sounds good. Good question.
Look, I've got the mic, so it's all mine. From my point of view, I think media plays a significant role in getting messaging out there. That's probably my my personal opinion.
That's true. No, it's 100% true. Like, we should speak about it in a completely different way, really, because yeah, for example, we have a Monday police wrap, and you hear about, they tell us about, you know, the most significant crime that they've gone out to on the weekend, and it's always stabbings, people dying on the road, and all these things. And they've been out to so many family violence calls. We never hear about it. And yeah, I think it's something that we do need to speak about more often. And then yeah, you can see some pretty gross headlines in some of the commercial papers, don't you, about which just don't help anything at all, which I won't rag on them too much. But no, it's something that we at the ABC need to do better as well, how to tell those stories, and not in a completely defeating way as well, because we have interviewed survivors of family violence before or sexual assault survivors, but in a way that's uplifting. Something that we are doing a bit is trying to have, we do like a gender diversity or diversity in general quota checklist every week. And that's been really good to improve the amount of women and non-binary and all sorts of people on the radio. And that's a relatively new thing, like a year old, which is, I love that. And also trying to like mix things up. For example, if there's a cooking segment, actually get a bloke on to talk about that, not a, you know, a female in a kitchen, and mix it up that way too. So thinking about, okay, not just about trying to get more women on the show, but having, different people in segments that you wouldn't expect them to. So challenging stereotypes that way, but we can do way more, to be quite honest. Yeah.
And I think if we look in the room, we have to recognise our circle of influence and what's our role. Is my role, sometimes it's about social norms and it is about individual behaviour, but I'm already hearing the structural changes that affect more than one person. So if we look at the work that Ryan's doing at a club level and how many people are impacted by that, they may not know how they're impacted or even what that outcome is, but all of a sudden they're in a more inclusive environment. And sometimes, it means we have to go outside of our comfort zone though and have conversations with people that is about growing their knowledge when we see that they may be holding harmful attitudes. Sometimes it is individual, but we need to be thinking really about that bigger picture. And when I affect change on this policy, what is the filter down system from that? Thinking about the structural changes, not just how we influence other individuals, how we support those individuals with the frameworks, the environments that sit around them. So if I have my child go into Boisdale Bride, probably going to happen in the next couple of years, if they go there, they're walking into an organisation, a club that supports the values that we've been talking about at home. The school that they go to supports them to learn and have safe conversations with other young people. They won't always be able to do that, but it's in place. And then thinking about the local government, the work that might be happening there. So I know that, we definitely are those that are working in this space. Just reflect on what's your ripple effect. And is it with family and friends? That sometimes can be the hardest space. And is my professional role, how far does it go? And
can you remember the four drivers of violence against women?
Do we want the drivers or the action to
both just
address it? So just looking at that, the condoning of violence, how can we interrupt that and challenge the condoning when we see it? But also what policies? I just think about the fact that up until the late 90s, not every state and territory recognised rape in marriage. Now, that was a legislative condoning of violence. The change in attitude will take time. So then being able to have those conversations, to challenge when you hear someone condoning violence against women, thinking about how can you address the limitation to women's voices, their independence in their private, their public life. We know that the National Community Attitude Survey told us that Australians are absolutely behind women in leadership and independence in public, not so much in private. So we need to start having those conversations in that space. So how can I promote women's leadership, women's independence, and hearing the structural changes in the police force that actually recognise women's role in public, not just in private? That's the ripple effect that changes, and we need that around us. How do we challenge those rigid beliefs around stereotypes that limit us and harm us? And we think about how they harm young men and boys as much as they harm young women and girls, and how they harm gender diverse people in this space as well. So thinking how you can do that. And then positive relationships between and among men and boys, women, girls, gender diverse. I guess going back to that one, I actually will have this is from the most recent Change the Story, the 2.0. And it does talk about that our Australian research demonstrates that male-dominated organisations, which Boisdale Briag is no longer, and groups more strongly reinforce masculine norms and behaviours that emphasise sexism, they emphasise homophobia, they emphasise disrespect and violence against women. So the ripple effect of what Boisdale Briag have done, directly addressing that. How do we set up the structures and systems to let people know we expect your behaviour to change, but we're going to support you to do that, which is going back to looking at the healing service. And this is not punitive, this is educative, supporting people.
I was just going to say, from a family violence space, we've had a very strong feminist lens across family violence, and we've had a shift in that space, but it's only been in recent years that we've acknowledged the importance of working with men and working with men in a respectful space, regardless of the violence that they perpetrate, and the need for more programs to work with men in a holistic way as well. And that builds on for men and for boys, and then the impact that will then have on women and girls as well.
Go for it.
Yeah, so the Department of Education and Training absolutely goes across early years, schools and tertiary. The Respect for Relationships initiative is focused on the early years and the school space. When you're talking about industrial relations, workplace, so it's whether it's an education, whether it's a workplace, it is not the role of the Respect for Relationships initiative itself, but there is work now happening through the TAFE system. It's that gradual, so not specifically happening in that space. Trish, you have influence there, calling on people to question and to start asking for these things is what made it change. I think back 17, 18 years ago, when we had tiny little pockets of respect for relationships in schools, pilots that were funded through Vic Health, that now mean every single school, Catholic, independent and public, can be doing this work and are expected to do this work. Starts out very small, little pebble at the end of the marathon, there's a hole in that foot. So yeah, so sorry we're not working directly in that space,
Sure.
but love to.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to speak to that point. 40 years ago, I had my first child, and my husband had grown up in an abusive family. And before it was an issue, he sought help. So my children never experienced family violence of any type. And my son's children only know what they read and hear from other people. It is that one pebble. It's that, I think I don't believe he's ever understood how much I admire him for taking that step. And I think men need to be encouraged and admired and lauded for taking the step to break a cycle, because we know that it goes from generation to generation. And so I just think that's really important.
Statistically, how many of these perpetrators reoffend with another family? So when we talk about the percentage of women who have felt family violence, how often does this person then move on to the next family, the next family, the next family? And what's done about that?
Quite prevalent, as far as I know, that Mark Rossiter was the detective sergeant at the Family Violence Investigation Unit when it was implemented at Sale. Might be able to give us a bit of a better. My understanding is, you've got to break that cycle with the family that the perpetrator is with. That's very difficult to do as well. But when the male party moves on, it might be all happy and roses to start off with, but the traits and the behaviours will eventually come in. So Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that perpetrators of family violence will continue to perpetrate until that they're really held to account, incarcerated, whatever the case may be.
I think it's about 80% of children will reconnect with their fathers, whether they're perpetrators of family violence or any other form of abuse. So there's an acknowledgement now that we really need to work with men and support men in this space to be great fathers, to be good partners. And a lot of men, you know, when you speak to them, they don't want to be violent, they don't want to hurt their family, but a lot of them have sit with a lot of trauma, and we need to work with them while not accepting that violence is okay towards their family, and it's holding those two lenses.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in from where Mel threw me under the bus and comment sort of on my experience as an investigation role. And whilst family violence happens in so many different dynamics across different environments, it is prevalent offenders re-offending in different environments with different partners. And as Sarah touched on earlier, their learned behaviours. So part of the strategy is, as a family violence investigation unit, will use intelligence to try and identify those high risk perpetrators, and we'll try and target them before they have the chance to commit further offences against new partners. And you know, and we'll target them when they're released from prison, and you know, healing services for Aboriginal or other communities. They're really important in, you know, preventing that re-offending. So we'll engage those high risk perpetrators in programs like that. And the police sort of act in a coordination role where sort of we'll step in and then we'll coordinate around and refer our high risk perpetrators to those services. And the same with, you know, there's high risk victim survivors who continually end up, not through any fault of their own, they end up in similar situations due to not knowing any different and because of the way they've been treated in the past. So we'll try and support them and coordinate and refer them to other services as well.
Well, that's why I have you, because I've heard from my friend who's a lawyer, and she works with survivors and also perpetrators. And she reckons that a lot of the time the perpetrators don't even realise that it's family violence or violence of any, because obviously it's not always really physical. There's the emotional abuse side of things, or it might be little things. They don't even realise what they're doing until police get involved, and they're charged with something and they have to spell it out. Is that your experience, or? Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you know, just the emotional abuse, you have financial abuse, controlling behaviours. There's so many different elements. And I suppose we've come a long way in protecting victim survivors of family violence. We have the intervention orders now, which have a number of conditions. And when they're explained to the perpetrator about what they can't do, they don't see it as family violence. So they can't, you know, control or abuse or emotionally abuse or financially abuse, and they're saying, well, that's not family violence. So so that process starts, and that education process starts there about what they can and can't do, and then there's obviously a legislative requirement that they follow it. Thanks for that. Good.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And it's definitely a really tricky space to navigate, isn't it, in that area? But once you start to get the man to understand that they do have issues and do have problems, and then are willing and invite them to go on that path of change, that's where you really see the implementation of that change, when men actually take up that step forward. The things that we do as well is we use culture as the part that grabs a man, that gets the man in, gives them something different, gives them something to understand. And when they start understanding their role as an Aboriginal man and their rights to their family and what they need to do, that's when you really start to engage a man. And that's what we find within our program. You know, when the man really connects to that cultural side and really understands, then he starts to look at all the other things, all the other areas. And then we can start putting them where they belong. You know, some of the issues and that, but we've had lots of great success stories, not just with men addressing their family violence, but reunification with their kids and that as well, but also men going on to join the workforce and working and really making some great contributions to back into the workforce and into life itself. But I'll tell you this one story. We had a man that come out with us that his family is well known and a member of the stolen generation. A number of family members were taken, and horrific stories to these men. So he grew up in this house. He grew up with his grandmother, lived with his grandmother, and lived there. So it was a really challenging time for the young man growing up, finding his own identity. Grew up very angry, you know, very frustrated, and everything else that goes on. I don't need to explain to people and that as well. And definitely, you know, his masculinity was a big problem for him. You know, the way he went, he actually ended up in jail and come to us straight from jail. So walked out of jail and walked straight into Wulgunggo, Ngalu. Didn't want to be there. Knew that he had to. The cultural thing was the thing that connected him. Wanted to be home, wanted to be with his family and that. Hated everyone in the world. Geez, you mentioned DHS to him and child protection, and it was all over. It was no good, and probably some good thinking behind that. So probably some rights there for him as well, because he'd seen all that wrong stuff that had happened for him. We need to put that in the right area and understand that. So he spent a fair bit of time within our program and really did a lot of good work, and then started to really look at himself and understand himself. And that part about taking responsibility for his own actions really come into play, and especially around our cultural protocols about your family structure, you know, your role as an uncle within your family, your role as a father, your role as a social father, and all the other things that need to go with that, and what you need to pass on as a dad to your kids, as an Aboriginal man, and things like that. So really took that on, really went well. Ended up leaving our program and went home, and was supported through a drug and alcohol program as well that's seen him get a house and a placement. So really become really stable within that. Continued his work with DHS and child protection that as well. Jumped every hoop he needed to jump with DHS. He actually invited me to come along to a meeting with him for his kids and that as well. And this meeting was determined what sort of contact he'd have with his kids and all this sort of stuff. And his mother had moved on to another partner, and there's some other trouble within there. So the kids were placed in care as well. And they were placed with her side of the family as well, not his side. So this fellow had got his act together enough, and we were sitting in this meeting, and it actually come out in the meeting when we were talking about it, well, when he was talking and that, how he addressed all his issues, addressed his problems, and been doing really well, and everything went on. And in that meeting, I can remember we both sat there. I'm getting a bit emotional now thinking about it. Had a real tear in our eye when they told him that he was going to get his kids back. And still today, lots of challenges for that man. You know, being a sole father, looking after 2 kids, and doing that sort of stuff. And we support him, and there's a few other supports around and things like that. But he's still got his kids today, still living with him. So that's a really great connection for that fella as well.
Oh, thank you. Shaun, yeah, thank you for your sharing and wonderful experiences that you've shared with us. Just wanted to add to that how important culture is, those cultural protocols, and the information that you have just shared. How can we, the question is, how can we get that information out to our community? And I know you mentioned earlier how important understanding and awareness is for our community of the cultural protocols and norms. And how can we have that information out through training, or are you able to, with your team, able to do that to some of our organizations? Because we are working with our mobs and our Indigenous families. And that's important to kind of have that awareness and understanding that you're talking about.
Yeah, thanks very much. And we do a lot of work. We do a lot of work within the community, and we really have changed attitudes in that as well, and really showcased our cultural approach and that as well. But we invite anyone to come down and have a look and see what we do, join in. You know, great to hear that the yellow door and some of the things there. I've learned some stuff today about the yellow door and that sort of stuff. So, you know, how can the yellow door support us, support our men? You know, things like that. So I think they're the real things. But we'd invite anyone to come down if they'd like to come down and have a look. And geez, if it's a nice enough day, we might even have enough men there to put on a little cultural ceremony and really showcase that cultural way as well. But I suppose the big, so that's probably that thing. The big thing is we empower our men to give that message as well. Yeah, so that's one of the big things that we do. And there's men within the facility that probably not ready just yet. There's also a lot of men that are ready to take that next step and empower and put that message out there as well. So we like to share that as well, share their men and that as well. And that goes a long way in that. So by all means, if anyone wants to look us up and come down and have a look, our doors are open, especially now that COVID's easing. We've done some great things in the community. We Ilbidgery Theatre, that has a great play that was called The Scarred Tree. So we got it and it come down to our facility and we ran it down there, which I don't know if people have heard of The Scarred Tree, but it's a fantastic, looks at family violence and the impacts and the drivers and everything else that goes along. Really confronting, really challenging. We adopted as a whole family violence day. We had Auntie Sandra Patton come down and speak to the fellas before about her work with JERA. And we had one of our facilitators that comes across and he's got an empathy but not sympathy program and spoke a lot about family violence. So we had these two speakers in the morning, and we had lunch together, and we had invited, there was about 50 people there, and plus our fellas and other men that were in trouble with the system and that as well. And then we all went down and watched this play, and it was really powerful and unpacked a lot of things and really confronting. So we're always looking for ideas like that as well. So our doors are open to anyone that has ideas. We have a really good relationship with the police force within Yarram as well that come out and visit and share their stories and you know, just really good. So that's what we do. We're really open to that. So I think I said enough about it. If anyone would like to come and have a look and see what we do, more than happy to do it. If anyone's got something that we can tap in and support, happy to do that. It is about partnerships and supporting each other.
We also have a men's worker. We have the women and children's family violence worker, and then we have a children and youth worker. So in the preventative space, the idea of the Orange Door is that we can address family violence and that schools and other organisations aren't waiting for it to get to a point where they need to report to child protection, that it's a one phone number for across the whole area, and that we can sort of support across that whole range. So from when it's just a concern about child wellbeing initially to the high end sort of family violence. We also have brokerage that we can assist with men, which previously we couldn't. So it's a really great space.
Thanks so much. I reckon we're well and truly out of time. As always, like, it should just be questions for the whole time and just ask questions for 2 hours, because that's, yeah, everyone's always dying to ask questions. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you all for spending this time to talk about, it's, you know, the heavy topics, but really important stuff to churn through. Leanne Fairbrother is going to come up on the stage. Thank you very much. Leanne has been doing all this, the huge amount of work behind the scenes. And yeah, it's with the Wellington Primary Care Partnership, and basically Leanne's just been beavering away. I just rock up and talk nonsense, so it's fine.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'll just make this short. I'd like to thank you all for coming and talking today. I'm sure we've learned a lot, and it's been, I see this as the start of a big conversation that we're having, and each year we really want to build on 16 Days of Activism. So really would love to have people involved, and if there's any other suggestions. We do have a feedback survey, which maybe we could pass out. It's just a QR code, and it takes 2 minutes. You could you can scan it on your phone. If you could just give us a little bit of feedback for today, because we'd love to do this again, and it's good for our funders as well to know the feedback and what we can do to improve. And if there's any other things that you'd like to see happen in this space, we'd love to hear your feedback. And I've just got a little token of appreciation for our 4 panelists. So thank you very much for coming. A little voucher. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks. We've got a light lunch, tea, coffee and drinks, so please help yourself before you go. And thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Yep.